Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here bright and early in a city with great nightlife. So, small feet. Today I'm going to be talking about the growing use of automated tools in US public libraries, a community that we don't often talk about at FACT. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the use of tools to measure the diversity of library collections. And I'm presenting this on behalf of my collaborators who couldn't be here today. So what is a collection diversity audit? It is a systematic review of a library's book collection that seeks to evaluate and measure the diversity of books by some kind of metric. According to a Library Journal survey in 2022, 46% of US libraries had conducted a collection diversity audit, and this was up from just 9% 2 years earlier. So why are all these libraries conducting collection diversity audits? Well, particularly in the last several years, there's been a growing awareness of the systemic inequities in the book business. So according to a study by So and Wurzerick, the mainstream US publishing industry has been extremely white for the last 70 plus years. This is not surprising to people, like anecdotally, we've known this for a long time, but now we're starting to have some evidence. So between 1950 and 2018, more than 95% of the most widely held titles published by mainstream publishers were written by white authors. And libraries, they don't make their own books, they buy books, primarily from the mainstream publishing industry. So this suggests that their collections are similarly skewed along these lines and other lines. So diversity audits aim to assess and address these gaps. While manual collection diversity audits, where people were pulling books from the shelves and rifling through pages, this practice is about a decade old, but it picked up around 2021 when commercial book vendors like Baker & Taylor, Ingram, and Overdrive debuted large-scale audit tools automated and powered by proprietary metadata. So where manually auditing just the children's section of a library might take months, these tools promise to audit entire collections, which could include, more than 1 million books in weeks or even days. So the companies also provide shopping lists and recommended books to fill these diversity gaps, and these are often books that are sold by the same vendor conducting the audit. So we were really curious about these tools, and we wanted to know how prevalent are these automated collection diversity audits, and who provides them at what cost? How do these audits actually work? What counts as a diverse book? And do library workers find these audits nuanced, trustworthy, and useful? Maybe most broadly, what happens when sensitive, value-laden cultural work is partly outsourced to automated systems created by commercial vendors? So we've been particularly excited to bring FACT research to bear on these developments in the library and cultural heritage space. In particular, we're building on work that examines algorithmic auditing practices, so work that audits the audits. And we've also really been drawing on work that examines the use of racial categories in algorithmic fairness research, which has a lot of parallels to these audits. So to answer our research questions, I think I'm having trouble advancing right now. Oops. Let's see. There we go. We took a few approaches. So we interviewed 14 public librarians from across the country. We conducted a survey where we asked librarians about their perspectives and experiences with these diversity audits. We obtained library spending records from a platform called GovSpend, and we analyzed them. We also analyzed vendor documentation, and we conducted informal background interviews with vendor employees. So what did we find? I don't have time to get into all of our findings, but I'll try to hit some of the highlights, and hopefully you can check out the paper if you're interested to learn more. So first, the first step for these companies and these tools is to define what diversity means And to do that, they come up with a list of standardized categories. So the categories differ a little bit depending on the tool and the vendor, but they all share similarities, and they all share this degree of incongruity. So vendors combine demographic markers like Black or Asian interest with thematic social issues like substance abuse and addictions, as well as umbrella terms like multicultural, resulting in an expansive but loosely organized schema. They then classify books into these categories largely by matching on subject headings. This is a core piece of metadata in the book world that is rife with its own problems, particularly around identity, and I'd be happy to talk more about that. As well as these proprietary data sources like lists of diverse books that are curated by library vendors. They then produce these quantitative reports that have a lot of data visualizations, like these pie charts that show your collection is 9% diverse, and compared to the average public library, which is 18% diverse, you're not doing very well, so maybe you need to increase the diversity of your collection. And then they also break down these results into these more specific categories that I just talked about. So vendors often claim that their audits are context sensitive and are designed to avoid reinforcing stereotypes, but it's really hard to assess how that sensitivity is applied at scale. So in one vendor report that we saw, Sherry Markson's What Really Happened in Wuhan was tagged as Asian interest, and this is a journalistic account of COVID-19's origins. Markson is a Jewish Australian journalist, and while the terms Asia and China are in the subject headings for this book is very different from the kinds of books that a library might be seeking out to increase the racial representation of their collection. So sort of along these lines, many of the librarians we spoke to expressed frustration with these overly broad and opaque categories and the books that they were getting recommended in these categories. Another common complaint was that they were getting recommended cookbooks in a particular category when they were actually seeking out something more substantial. Many of our participants said that these audits were not really effective at catering to their local community needs. And they particularly were frustrated by some categories like Indigenous or Black that were sort of erasing a lot of internal diversity in those terms. They also expressed frustration with the lack of transparency in these audit tools, not really fully understanding how these audits worked. And about half of them expressed concerns about a potential conflict of interest when these vendors are performing the audits and then recommending books to buy to fill those gaps. So despite all of these problems and other problems that we talk about in the paper, many librarians felt like these tools were convenient, time-saving, and useful. They were effective for communicating with stakeholders like library boards, and they were even effective for communicating with groups that are actively opposed to libraries, and this was a surprise to us. So many libraries in the US are under attack right now. There are lots of efforts to ban books, to get books removed from collections, because there are claims that these collections are too woke and too diverse. And these reports, some librarians told us, provide this evidence to say, we're not that crazy. We're not that different than other libraries. It's not like we're just offering wildly crazy books that no one else is offering. And yeah, that was very humbling for us to hear about that kind of use case, which was sort of different than what we had expected. So in conclusion, some form of computational assistance may be necessary to assess the inclusivity of large collections, and many librarians sort of attested to the usefulness of such a tool. But we found that these automated vendor-led audits, at least at this point, offer a convenient but often homogenizing solution that risks reducing the complexity of identity into these standardized categories and to deepening libraries' infrastructural dependence on these vendors and these commercial third-party systems. We think this work is especially urgent in a political moment marked by renewed attacks on libraries, education, and marginalized communities, in the context of rising authoritarianism and right-wing censorship efforts, which has included in the last several months the firing of the first Black Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, over basically fabricated DEI concerns. We need genuine engagement with and protection of diversity, and we really want to support libraries in resisting tech co-option and in ensuring automation serves the public good. Thank you.